Hello, everybody. Welcome to our screencast to talk about Brave New World, chapters 3 through 5. It is strange for all of us to get used to this new reality, but hopefully, supports like Screencast help you feel more connected to the types of activities we would do in class if we were allowed to be there. So, hopefully, your reading of Brave New World is going well. I know chapter 3 is kind of bizarre because it's written in those multiple perspective kind of ways towards the end of the chapter. So, I thought it'd be worthwhile to spend some time just going over some of the key characters and events. You're going to utilize this work along document. So, provided it pops up for us in a second. In assignments, you will see in classwork, in our classroom here, you're going to see Brave New World chapters 3 to 5 notes work along sheet. And if you preview it, you'll see that there are several questions that essentially correspond to each slide or main point that we're going to cover today. So my expectation is that you will have a copy of this in classroom. You will jot down notes as we go through the slides or in your own time. You can, of course, with a screencast, press pause. You can look at the slides on your own if you'd rather. But either way, you're going to go through those slides, fill in these notes really well, and then you'll submit those for a grade today. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. So let's get back to the main event, which is our notes on chapters 3 to 5 of Brave New World. All right, here goes. So the first thing that we should really talk about is we've met our protagonist. We've met Bernard Marx, or as the British would say, Bernard Marx. And Bernard is a different kind of character. If you take a look at the picture I've got in the upper right of the slide, kind of a drawing that I thought sort of fit his worrisome character. Bernard is an alpha psychologist, so he's really smart. We know he got every advantage on the assembly line in terms of oxygen and blood surrogate and everything else. And then he was taught and conditioned to be an alpha psychologist. But the problem is that despite all of that predestination and all of that biological work and then psychological work done on this man, he himself, an alpha psychologist, thinks unconventionally. So hopefully you caught that. Bernard does not seem to think like everyone else in the Brave New World. Everyone seems to go along with everything they're supposed to do, not like robots, but pretty robotically, and not ask too many questions and, do everything like dutiful citizens. But Bernard thinks unconventionally. He goes in different directions. There's a rumor that a chemical error on the assembly line is what caused him to be, and I'm going to use air bunnies, stunted. So stunted, he's this much shorter than the regular alpha. So if we put a line of alphas together in a row, and I ran my hand along the top of them like that, they would be perfectly level and even until we get to Bernard, and then we would dip down just a bit and go back up in that line. For this one little difference about him, he is treated throughout his lifetime as a freak, as an assembly line error. And I don't know if you're told long enough that you don't belong, that you start to believe it, or if there's something else going on here. But Bernard is different. He wants to treat women like Lenina with respect. He's got his eye on Lenina. Yes, he's physically attracted to her, but he wants to treat her with respect. And he's disgusted the way the other men, did you notice the phrase he uses? Treat her like meat, or think of her like meat, or she herself thinks of herself like meat. And he does not want to think of her that way. And the other thing that makes him super weird in the Brave New World is that he enjoys time alone. So they never want to be alone. They always want to be together. They always want to be in groups. They never want to be alone. They never want to think about anything or have some time, private time. No, that is bad. And so he enjoys time alone, and he also enjoys nature. You catch him looking up at the moon when he catches the helicopter, he wants to be out in nature. And that makes him different too. And remember all of that psychological warfare that they played on each of the citizens to not like nature, to not want to go outside. And yet here we have Bernard, who likes nature, wants to have a sort of monogamous relationship with a woman, likes being alone, likes thinking. He's very, very different. So I'm not sure if he took some time to think about his name. But with Huxley, the names are very significant. This is satire, remember. So the fact that he's Bernard Marx makes his namesake Karl Marx, who we've talked a little bit about. You see him pictured there, rocking the awesome beard and mustache. Wow, that's quite a look that Karl's got going there. But Bernard is named after Karl Marx. So we know that in 1848, Marx published the Communist Manifesto with Friedrich Engels. For that, he was exiled to London, where he wrote the first volume of Das Kapital and lived the remainder of his life there. So I thought we'd take just a second to look at bio.com's review or overview, very short, of Karl Marx's life. So let's enjoy this together.
Karl Marx, the father of Marxism, was born on May 5th, 1818, in the Kingdom of Prussia.
Hopefully the audio carries through.
Confederation.
His grandfathers on both sides came from lines of famous rabbis, but his own father had converted to Protestantism, given the barriers to Jewish involvement in society as full citizens.
In 1835, Marx left home to attend the university, where he became fascinated with the teachings of German philosopher G.W.F. Hegel.
He had a full and exciting life, but was captivated by these big ideas coming from Hegel about what determined the path of a society of human civilization.
Between 1843 and 1845, Karl Marx forged two relationships that changed the course of his life.
One was to his wife, Jenny von Westphalen, who came from the Prussian aristocracy, a happy marriage, 7 children, and the other was his intellectual bonding with Friedrich Engels, who brought to the relationship a set of experiences and knowledge that really opened Marx's eyes to new approaches.
In 1848, Marx and Engels laid out their concept of socialism in their most famous work, the Communist Manifesto. In their writings, they championed the worker and advocated a classless society that dissolved bonds between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie.
The Communist Manifesto
In their writings, they championed the worker and advocated a classless society that dissolved bonds between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie.
And an activist. It's also remarkably well timed. The ink was barely dry when a wave of revolution swept all over Europe. He was seen as so seditious that he couldn't find a home anywhere in continental Europe, and therefore exiled to London.
In London, Karl took a job as a European correspondent to the New York Tribune.
Writing for the American market, he naturally had to turn his attention to American politics.
In London, Karl took a job as a European correspondent to the New York Tribune.
Movement, and ultimately the Civil War.
Marx went on to write economic and political works, including Das Kapital. In 1864, Marx was elected to the General Council of the International Working Men's Association, where he fought against capitalism as well as the anarchist wing of the organization. Marx was elected to the General Council of the International Working Men's Association,
he had an
where he fought
international
against
perspective on
capitalism
things. He had
as
a
well as the
worldwide
anarchist wing
view,
of the
a
organization.
very, very wide aperture.
By the early 20th century, Marx's theories became increasingly popular and were adopted by different countries. The Russian Revolution of 1917 ushered in the first communist government, and after World War II, socialism and communism spread to countries throughout Europe, Asia, and Latin America. Ushered in the first communist government,
communism appeared
and after World War
because
II,
it
socialism
provided
and
such a
communism
contrast
spread to
with
countries
the
throughout Europe,
existing
Asia,
economic
and Latin
situation.
America.
Whether he foresaw it or not, his impact on revolutionary movements from Russia to China to Cuba, Vietnam, North Korea has been immense. They all base their legitimacy and their program on Marxism.
Karl Marx died of illness on March 14, 1883, and is buried in Highgate Cemetery in London. On his tombstone is inscribed the final line of the Communist Manifesto, "Workers of all lands unite," and is buried in Highgate Cemetery in London.
I've been there.
On his tombstone is inscribed the final line of the
Took a
Communist
rubbing
Manifesto,
of his grave.
"Workers of all lands unite."
Okay, so that's some information about Karl Marx. So what we now have to think about, and we may not have enough information yet because we don't know a ton about Bernard, but what we'll have to figure out is, does Huxley use this and give our main character the name Marx because he's trying to praise the character and praise Karl Marx? Or is he maybe doing the opposite or somewhere in between? Is Bernard having Karl Marx's name a credit or a source of ridicule, or both? That's what we're going to need to figure out. Does Huxley value Bernard? Certainly, I think most of you have responded to the Society of the Brave New World by saying that it's nuts, right? That you wouldn't want to become like one of those robotic citizens. So the fact that Bernard does things like enjoys being alone or likes nature or wants to treat a partner with respect, those kinds of things we tend to find more heroic. So we have to see. But certainly there's something up by giving Bernard that last name Marx. Okay, so just keep an eye out for that and think about that a little bit. In our next slide, we want to talk about Mustafa Mond. So think about Mond in Espanol, mundo, the world. Mustafa Mond. He is, and people always want to say Mufasa, like in Lion King, but it's not Mufasa. It's Mustafa Mond. And he's one of 10 world controllers for Europe, in this case for Western Europe. He's referred to as his Fordship. So like his lordship, but no, his Fordship. And the weird thing about him as a controller is that he has knowledge that very few have. Only the other 9 world controllers would have information about history, languages, religion, literature, banned topics that they are not allowed to talk about. And Mond, I don't know if he struck you this way, but he seems very lonely. And one of the things he does in chapter 3, especially at the beginning, is he explains some of the disgusting horrors of family and friends, basically what we have, and justifies his efforts as a controller. He's very, very cool about everything. And this picture is taken from, there was a film version of Brave New World that is horrible, horrible, terrible, horrible, horrible, terrible. Do not watch it. It should be banned from the universe. It does not make any sense. It's one of those movies that totally goes rogue, does not stay to the book at all. It is terrible. Terrible, horrible. Have I mentioned that it's terrible? Okay. So when we meet Mustafa Mond in chapter 3, in our books, if you have your book handy, it's pages 30 and 31. And we are continuing with the understanding of like, how do they get conditioned and brainwashed in this society? And so it's a really disturbing scene. If the electrocution of babies wasn't enough for you, this one is even more disturbing, right? Because the director and his students stood for a short time watching a game of centrifugal bumble puppy. 20 children grouped in a circle around a chrome steel tower. A ball is thrown up so to land on the platform at the top of the tower, rolled down the interior, fell on a rapidly revolving disc, was hurled through one or another of numerous apertures pierced in the casing, and had to be caught. Strange, mused the director as they turned away. Strange to think that even in our Ford's day, most games were played without more apparatus than a ball or two, and a few sticks, and perhaps a bit of netting. Imagine the folly of allowing people to play elaborate games which do nothing whatsoever to increase consumption. It's madness. Nowadays, the controllers won't approve of any new game unless it can be shown that it requires at least as much apparatus as the most complicated of existing games. He interrupted himself. That's a charming little group, he said, pointing. In a little grassy bay between tall clumps of Mediterranean heather, two children, a little boy of about 7 and a little girl who might have been a year older, were playing very gravely and with all the focused attention of scientists intent on the labor of discovery, a rudimentary sexual game. Charming, charming, the DHC repeated sentimentally. Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Charming. You see little 7-year-olds playing a sexual game, you do not say charming. Wow. Charming, the boys agreed, but their smile was rather patronizing. They put aside similar childish amusements too recently to be able to watch them now without a touch of contempt. Charming? But it was just a pair of kids fooling about. That was all. Just kids. I always think the director was continuing in the same maudlin tone when he was interrupted by a loud boo-hooing from a neighboring shrubbery, emerging a nurse leading by the hand a small boy who howled as he went. An anxious-looking little girl trotted at her heels. "What's the matter?" asked the director. The nurse shrugged her shoulders. "Nothing much," she answered. "It's that this little boy seems rather reluctant to join in ordinary erotic play. I noticed it once or twice before, and now again today. He started yelling just now." "Honestly," put the anxious little girl, "I didn't mean to hurt him or anything. Honestly." "Of course you didn't, dear," and the nurse reassuringly said. "And so," she went on, turning back to the director, "I'm taking him to see the assistant superintendent of psychology, just to see if it's at all abnormal." "Quite right," said the director. "Take him in. You stay here, little girl," he added as the nurse moved away with her still howling charge. "What's your name?" "Polly Trotsky." Okay, so here's the world they live in, right? Kids are being conditioned at a very young age to think of sexual interactions as simple entertainment. It's disgusting. As they continue, though, they run into Mustafa Mond and they treat him like a god. Um, the DHC had at that moment, on 33, at that moment sat down on one of the steel and rubber benches conveniently scattered throughout the gardens. But at the sight of a stranger, he sprang to his feet and darted forward, his hand outstretched, smiling with those teeth, effusive. "Controller! What an unexpected pleasure. Boys, what are you thinking of? This is the controller. This is his fortune, Mustafa Mond." Mond is treated like a god. He will go on to tell the boys some things that they know nothing about, which to me is why I'm suggesting that he is lonely. Why is he talking to the kids like this? It's against their conditioning. He seems to want to play with them like these head games, and it is bizarre. It is truly bizarre. All right, how we doing? Okay with the work along document? Hopefully, don't forget we're checking in with this document. We're up to number 4. We're just about to start that. So make sure you're keeping up. If not, press pause and go back. So the other thing that we should talk about that comes up in the reading that you did for today is the use of soma. Soma. So look at the root of that word, som, S-O-M, som. Like when you have insomnia, what can you not do? So som is usually reference to sleep, right? Insomnia is the inability to sleep. So soma is taking that root, and it's almost like they're walking around asleep. They're not literally asleep, but they're consciously asleep. In the utopia, they take soma at the end of their workday. They're given like a ration of soma. And it's the perfect drug, and it's given by the government to keep the population happy and distracted. Soma is also the thing that keeps everyone chemically young, and the key to this, prevents emotions, which the government feels leads to instability. Okay, so whenever the people might have the opportunity to want to feel an emotion, right, some sort of deep connection to somebody, or feeling upset about something, or feeling discontent about something, or wondering, or worrying, or doing all the things that we do, take soma, take soma, take soma, take soma, take soma. So if we were together, the question I would ask you to think about is there a soma culture in our society? do people medicate often? And I'm not being disrespectful to people who have genuine physiochemical needs, and need modern pharmaceuticals to help with that stability. But I mean, I heard that there is Prozac for dogs or cats. Um, People do medicate a lot, a lot, a lot. You know that I've recently lost my brother and my sister, and many, many, many well meaning people, friends, have asked me, have you spoken to your doctor? There are things that they can prescribe to help you with sorrow. And I haven't. I mean, I have talked to my doctor, but I haven't taken any medications for it because my thought is I'm supposed to be sad. It's a very sad thing. Um, but I mean, it's just natural. I'm just surprised at how many people have said that to me. That medication is what would be helpful. Soma. Make sure you're paying attention how they use Soma. Another slide here is the feelies. I don't even really want to talk about this, but the feelies are like what they say they are. They're films that you can feel. So think of it like virtual reality, but with the inclusion of the sense of touch. Um, they're pornographic films that can be felt as well as seen. And people go to them for fun. They represent the modern attitude towards sex, the hypnopedic slogan, everyone belongs to everyone else. This picture is disturbing to me, but it's just of like a 3D movie. But what they just go and they hold on to these handles and they feel all of the things that are being portrayed on the screen. And, think about what the effect of that kind of entertainment is over time on the citizens. This constant stimulation, constant hyperstimulation, this degrading of any physical contact as meaning anything emotional, making it just an entertainment thing like you would do on a whatever night, to pass the time. It's really bizarre to me, but the feelies show up quite a bit. And then we meet another character, Helmholtz Watson. Helmholtz, chapter 4. He is cool. Did you like Helmholtz? His job is to write slogans for the College of Emotional Engineering. Let's just say he's very popular with the opposite sex. He's got quite a reputation for sleeping with a number of women per week. He's athletic and handsome. And it's almost like that little bit that Bernard didn't get on the assembly line, that he was deprived, that made him this much shorter, was picked up by Helmholtz, because Helmholtz is just that much better than the average person, the average alpha. And he and Bernard are friends in that they share a sense of individuality. So if you were to take a quiz, I would certainly ask you, what kinds of reasons are, there for Bernard and Helmholtz to be friends. And one of them, the main one, is that they share a sense of individuality. Because Helmholtz has decided now to go straight edge, which was a term that they used when I was in high school. But it means he's going to be a pure living human being. He's swearing off soma, he's swearing off sex, he's swearing off all of the frivolous entertainment. And he wants to, remember, he writes slogans all day. So he writes things like ending is better than mending. A gram is better than a dam. And all of those slogans that we hear throughout the text that they've used to brainwash and hypnopedically brainwash. Helmholtz has decided he wants to write something real. He wants to say something real. And so he is going to give up the soma. He's going to give up sleeping around. He's going to give up all this busy entertainment all the time and spend some time alone and spend some time thinking and figuring out what's real and what he really wants to say. And then he's going to write that. So, I mean, Helmholtz seems awesome. Do you think so? Who would you cast if we had to cast a movie version of it that's nothing like the one that's starring Leonard Nimoy, which you're never ever going to watch because remember, I said it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. Who would we cast as Helmholtz? Remember, he's got to be like really buff, and he's got to be really powerful and persuasive, and he's got to be charismatic, and he's got to be interesting, and he's got to have an edge to him. You think about that. You write that in your notes, maybe. Who would you cast in the film version for Helmholtz? While Bernard is with Helmholtz, he's a little freaked out. He's always thinking like, oh, are they listening? Oh, are they listening? He checks the door. Bernard's a little bit paranoid. And Helmholtz actually says he wishes Bernard would show a little more pride towards the end of that chapter. So Helmholtz is looking at his friend and feeling a little bad, a little bit of pity for him, a little bit of a weakness or flaw coming out in Bernard. He's scared. He's scared they're going to get caught. But we haven't heard a whole lot about what happens to people who are doing things that are not completely harmonious with Brave New World's rules. Okay. Next stop, one of my favorite stops, is chapter 5 in the typical utopian evening. Anyone notice that picture to the right? Any of my friends been to London? That is Westminster Abbey, and that is one of the most famous churches and landmarks in all of England. And it is amazing. If you ever go in there, there are all these crypts. I remember when I was studying in England, I went there one time at night, and there are all these crypts on the sides of the abbey. This is the place where royal weddings have occurred and the coronations occur, and it's just a really well-known British landmark. And when you go to London, usually you see it. It's right around the corner from the Houses of Parliament and Big Ben and all of that. And you go in, and anyway, that night I went in the evening when I was a college student in London. The crypts are all on the side, and in them are buried the illustrious dead of England. So you have kind of like a science corner of people famous for science, and then you have the authors corner, and you see references to different famous literary writers from England. And I was talking to one of the security guards with his bowler hat and really cool guy. And he was telling me that there are so many bones under the stones. And this was in the mid 90s when I was living there. There are so many bones under the stones of Westminster Abbey that they can no longer bury anyone else there. You have to agree, if you want to be buried in Westminster Abbey, to be cremated. And so that's really interesting to me. But anyway, so Lenina and Henry go there. But did you notice how Westminster Abbey has been converted into a cabaret? So now it's a nightclub. It's a nightclub where people go and get their groove on before they go home with their partners and have relations, and then go to sleep and get up the next day and go to work again. They eat there, they take soma, they dance. Think about all of the sensations that are stimulated in this place. They hear music, so sound. They have lights projected on the ceiling, so their visuals are stimulated. They're dancing, so they're touching and they're feeling one another. They're taking soma, they're drinking it, they're eating it. The sound of the music is playing in their ears and thumping and thumping and thumping in their ears. And all of this is happening as they two-step on the dance floor, literally on the graves of the historically important figures of England. So this site, this scene that Huxley has created is completely sacrilegious. This is what the modern world has become. We have no respect for history, no respect for death, no respect for the church. And here we are dancing around on the graves of those that we should show more respect to. It is interesting. But if this is satire, remember, what is he suggesting about the people through such a setting? He could have put this anywhere. He puts it at Westminster Abbey in a church. An abbey is a church. And so he is definitely saying something about this. We also get some insight into Henry and Lenina's little relationship. And we find out some information about these characters. So we're going to do more with a little bit deeper analysis later on about the difference between Fanny's date with Henry and Fanny's date with Bernard. There's so much in there. But for now, hopefully you're feeling pretty good about these chapters. So I have one mission for you before we wrap, and that is for you to have a power right. So thinking about your understanding of Brave New World chapters 3 to 5, what is your gut telling you are some institutions or subjects or attributes of humanity that Huxley is satirizing. Like, what is he worried about? What's his concern? And how do we know this? How do we know that he is worried about this? How is he showing this? Remember, satirically. He could be using hyperbole. He could be using understatement. He could be using irony or pathos. He could be using all of those, sarcasm and mockery, those tools that we've been working on for satire. So think about it, finish up your notes, be sure that you submit your notes through Classroom once you've completed them. And if you have any questions, you absolutely should drop them in the comment section of Classroom so other students can see.